Step in the ring, it's time to play. Coach René and Matt lead the way. Radical MMA brings the heat. The martial culture podcast can't be beat. Punches fly, minds collide. Technique and heart side by side. Tune in now, don't hesitate. The martial culture podcast, great and straight.
How are you?
I'm great.
And
straight.
Perfect.
How are you?
I'm great and kind of curvy. We'll see.
So last week we started a discussion.
Oh yeah,
That-
little teaser.
I really need to get it off my chest.
Okay.
So we talked about styles, right? And we talked that a lot of times styles can be just a made up marketing ploy, but there is legitimate difference. Like if you go to a capoeira school and then you go to a boxing school or you go to a fencing school, obviously they're all going to be very different, right?
Mhm.
So there is meaning in larger styles. But I want to ask you a question. Do you know how many karate styles there are in the world?
It's either 7 or 300.
I actually don't know.
Oh, we ask
because
AI?
it's impossible to know.
Let's ask
It's
AI.
probably over 5 or 6 or 7,000 minimum. I think there's probably around 15, 20,000.
How many styles of karate currently exist in the world? Let me
I'm curious what AI says. Though Elon Musk's Grok is gonna say the only karate is Nazis. So something, did you hear about that? Grok turned into mega Nazi.
That was
It
pretty
was
impressive.
unbelievable.
Hey, you there? Poor connection. All right.
Right, no worries. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out later. But the thing is that it started out karate had no styles. And then they started branching off. Now, the funny thing is, I talked about it in one other podcast. There's this thing called Shu-Ha-Ri, right, in Japanese martial arts. So Shu is like you learn what your teacher has to teach you exactly. Ha is you kind of break that and make it your own. And Ni is you depart from that teaching and create your own teachings, right? And that is, what does it say?
75.
75. Well, that's so wrong. But
That's a lot.
It's way too few. But I'd like it. I wanted to see what lists of the 75. But anyway, so I can, off the top of my head, I can probably think of 40, 50 right off the top of my head. Right. Anyway, but so the interesting thing is when you get to that last stage of departing, what does that mean? If you're not teaching the exact thing or what your teacher taught, are you doing the same thing? So some people say the answer is no. So a real great martial artist I respect, and we had her on the podcast, Maya, who is a professor of Filipino martial arts, said her instructor told her that every Filipino martial artist in their lineage is basically creates their own style, right? They're like from this lineage, but then there's this style or this style, and they actually name it a different style. That was like, that's expected. That you make it your own means you do something different, and it's stylistically different.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing something different on a day-to-day basis, I guess that is different, right?
Sure.
But the question is like, how different, right? So I'll give you an example. A really good example is Kyokushin karate. Kyokushin karate is a really famous knockdown style. There was one style of Kyokushin, right? Just one. But the founder, Oyama, was a real tough, hard to get along with guy, kind of like me. And so he wound up kicking a lot of people out of his style for sometimes behavior reasons, sometimes reasons he didn't like it. The main one was he had some students who legitimately were interested in what we call today mixed martial arts, meaning mixing at that time judo and karate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And other stuff, right? And he's like, nope, this is all we do. And he's like, you want to do that? Hamon, which means, banished.
Whoa.
And so or they would say, hey, this teaching, you teach like this, but hey, what about this? Hamon, banished.
Wow.
Right? So he legitimately, the first person to that I know of was Ashihara, and that guy created a little bit more kickboxing approach. And if you ever heard of K1, that comes out of that lineage. So it kind of came out of that lineage. The next one is person I have a personal experience with. It was the art of Kudo. So this is actually a really, really great example to tell you what I'm saying. So he was a judo guy who also was doing karate, and he also was doing like boxing.
Yeah.
And then the guy says that the master says, get out. We're just karate people. So he's like, okay, and creates Dai Dojuku, means great way, big way, meaning wide, wider thinking. And basically created an MMA style karate. In UFC 2, Ichihara fought Royce Gracie and lost, but before that, in the prelims that you don't see in the videotapes, he actually won like 4 or 5 matches or something. Like, really, really tough guy, really good style of fighting, more stand-up based, and they didn't have the same ground skills as the Gracies did in the beginning, but that they could fight. I mean, these guys could fight, and they basically integrated boxing, kickboxing, boxing, karate stuff as well, and a lot of judo and a lot of sambo, and then jiu-jitsu. So basically, he would always integrate things that really work. The only thing is their rule set. They would compete under a very interesting rule set, which was you could do, it's like basically like an MMA match where you could do anything, punch, kick, elbow, knee. They wear these super safe helmets that have like a plexiglass shield. So the head contact is a little low, so they allowed head contact, which was not part of Kyokushin. You could do any strike you want. You could do any takedown you want. You're forced to wear a gi. So the gi was, you had to wear a gi, but it could be a gi top only. Like you could wear not gi pants, right?
Pantsless.
Like, no, like a sambo, because sambo they wear spats. They don't wear like gi
excited.
pants, right?
Yeah.
And you could throw people to the ground, and you could do any submission on the ground, anything. Except there was a time limit on the ground of 2 times per fight, where the fight is 5 minutes. You could only go to the ground twice, and you could only be on the ground maximum 1 minute. So there is an emphasis on striking and rather than ground, right? But it's very interesting. Oh, they also allow headbutts and groin shots too.
All right.
Very, very cool art, right? Now, their day-to-day training now is very different from the parent art Kyokushin. Very different. They're so different. Let me tell you what happened. So actually, let me back up. So lots of people split from all the different karate styles, created many, many styles. I remember going to, when I was living in Japan, visiting 50, 60 different names of different styles of karate that existed in Tokyo, right? And some look more like kickboxing now. Some look more like really traditional. So they're all very different, right? So at some level, it's not just marketing. They legitimately are doing different things, right? At some level, it is politics and marketing too. Like the Kyokushin organization split when the main founder died, and they had this big political fight, and they created the new Kyokushin Foundation, which is run by Midori Kenji and Master Midori Kenji, and I think the Kyokushin, his Oyama's original wife or daughter, and then there's another, the original Kyokushin, and then there's a third Kyokushin. So there's 3 organizations. They all sued each other.
Oh my God.
They all sued each
Like
other.
the
There's this
Gracies.
big, crazy, right? This big legal battle went for years, and finally they all agreed to just live and let live. And the funny thing is, this one is dumb because they do the exact same thing. There's no stylistic difference. It's all just political, right? And it was like, who's going to be the top? Well, you said, Master Oyama said I was the number 1 guy. So this guy says I should be. The other guy says and then the wife says, no, it should be this guy. And everybody split, and it was just, money grubbing. I don't know, money grubbing, but power for sure. And who gets to be the top dog, right? And it was very ugly. But now the funny thing is, this is already like that happened when I was in Japan. It was very disappointing and very ugly. But now the organization is starting to come together. So they have this championship because they all are exactly the same. So yes, they have different style names now, but it's bullshit. So it's just political. So if you're doing the same thing day in, day out, why are you making a different style, right? If you teach exactly the same way, why are you making a different style? Even in the like judo went to Korea, and if you train in Korea, they don't call it judo, they call it yudo, which is the Korean pronunciation of judo too, but they're like, nah, it's different. And their grips are different, but they still compete under the same rules. So this is another weird one. Like they compete again in the same same rule system. They gripping fighting is different, but that's more like tactics and strategy rather than are you doing a different art? Right. And I would say they're not, but that's up to point. And I guess I think you could ask a number of the Korean judo practitioners, do you think it's different art? Some would say no, and some would say yes. Some would say, oh, it's just a pronunciation difference. We're saying the word judo in Korean, and some would say no, judo is judo. It's our art. We're different, and there's judo and judo, and they're different. I'm not sure about that, but okay, but who knows? So there's tons of different styles. And what makes a different style? Like, I want to ask you, like, what do you think would make something different from something else? Like in a martial arts school, obviously, like, you know, not like you train, but just using common sense. What would you think?
I mean, different moves?
Yeah, like exactly. Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Completely different moves, right? Okay. What if they have the same moves though? What if they have the same moves?
So what would make it different?
That's a good question, right?
Uniforms, I guess, could make it different.
Yeah, I mean, definitely different equipment.
Different rituals.
Yeah. Different rituals. Interesting. I like that. Different culture. Yes. Okay, I like that answer. There's no right answer. But I would say if they have the same basic techniques, because you know what? A lot do. The way they think about doing the techniques. So, for example, you can read and write English, and I can read and write English, but we don't write like Ernest Hemingway. And Ernest Hemingway doesn't write like Stephen King. And at some level, Stephen King, a horror writer, is not writing the same way as Agatha Christie, a mystery writer. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why they divide these up. Yeah, it's all writing, it's all English, but this is here, this is here. This is significantly different. Your expectations are different, the plots are different, right. And the skill and the storytelling acumen of each person is different. The way they use the language is, you know, these masters of the art is going to be different from you and me. So is it a different language? No, but it is a different expression of that language. So much so that romance is not the same as science fiction. You know, obviously,
don't blend them.
You know, I don't know. It's a big thing now. You know, romantasy. It's the fantasy romance, sort of like, you know, like the big seller in fantasy.
Ooh,
now.
hobbits. Write a book about romance novel about hobbits.
No, it's more
big
like
feet.
it's more like Twilight type stuff. You know. Anyway, whatever. So the question is, like, when you're using the same material differently, if it's such a significant difference, doesn't it deserve a different name?
Sure.
So I would say this: the number one thing is, if using kind of the similar moves, what the biggest difference that would have to make it a different style is the rules you compete under, right?
Sure.
So if you like, I don't know if people realize that Taekwondo is actually an offshoot of Japanese karate. It's like impolitical to say that, but it's kind of true, right? Obviously they have their own input, but Taekwondo competition rules are very different from all the different karate rules. And then there's Shotokan point system, Kyokushin knockdown rules, K1 kickboxing, which is again an offshoot of they're all different rules, and they look totally different because the rules are different, right? And the way people fight and strategically different. They're still doing punches, they're still doing kicks. Now, of course, Muay Thai has the same moves as K1, but K1 has significantly different rules in that when you clinch, you can't hold the clinch for very long. So it makes the game, and they score in Thailand, they score kicks much more than they score punches. So of course people tend to kick more and clinch more because it scores more and you can stay in a clinch. Versus K1 fighters, they're more like what we think of as traditional kickboxers. They clinch less and they box and kickbox maybe 50-50, right? So It's different.
Yeah.
The same moves, but because of the rules are different, the strategies and the techniques and the way they put them together are different,
Okay.
right? So one, you're right, different techniques. Two, different strategies and different rule systems. And then you said something very interesting, different culture and different rituals. I really like that answer. I don't know what to think about that, but I would say that is a very good answer. If when you walk in the gym and the culture is completely different from another place, is it so different that it's a different style? That's possible. That's a very good answer. But the question is, how do you decide? I don't know. I guess that's up to everybody different.
Could we invent a style of karate?
Yeah, I mean, most people do. There's hundreds of Americans who've actually done that. One of them is, like, a lot of them are called American karate.
Oh.
They move differently from traditional Japanese karate. Exactly. Yeah, the most important thing is you wear a gi that has an American flag on it.
There you go.
And a bandana.
Yes.
You gotta have a big bandana
Sunglasses
and a ponytail.
inside.
You know, there's a rule. There's a rule in the bylaws. You must have a big, long bandana if you do American karate or kung fu.
Yeah.
You have to have
Steven Seagal.
Yeah. You know.
Yeah.
Right, exactly right. So, okay, where's it we're gonna be getting to? This long story. Everybody's bored. We're gonna get to the pit point.
Okay.
So, the Gracies come out, and people don't realize that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is based on Judo. That is true. Nobody denies this.
Okay.
Maeda Mitsuo, one of the major fighters of Judo, who trained under some of the founders and some of the other people, traveled the world, fought. But as he fought, you know what he did? He changed the way he fought. He added in a lot of things that weren't part of Kodokan rules because he was fighting in different rules and different things. And he added some things here and there. And he was settled down in Brazil and taught the Gracies. And as people understand it, what he was teaching was his own blend. But he never called it by a different name. But he did say he did Jiu-Jitsu. Now that's an interesting point. He did say he did Jiu-Jitsu because Kodokan Judo is a form of Jiu-Jitsu. Jiu-Jitsu is, by definition, created in the 19th century word, but it basically refers to the unarmed grappling styles of the Japanese tradition. That's really what it is. So accordingly, Judo, which comes from that, is a form of Jiu-Jitsu, right? That's the overarching umbrella. And he stopped saying that he was doing Kodokan Judo because he knew that the founder of Judo, Jigoro Kano, was very against mixed martial arts. He's like, it's too violent. You know, it's not good for culture and philosophy and this. He knew he was very against it. And and Maeda was doing lots of mixed martial art fights, right? So he's like, I don't want to tarnish the reputation of Judo with this more violent thing, so I'll use the catchphrase Jiu-Jitsu. But technically speaking, that's not really changing, you know, the orientation.
One choice changed the trajectory of a whole art.
Yeah, right. I know. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Yeah. So Judo just focused on competing under the Judo rules because Kano's objective was to teach something useful, but mostly to have like a national cultural movement in Japan for the Japanese youth. They learn some martial arts, but they learn some exercise, just like baseball in America, like a national sport. That was really his goal, so that it would be very kid-friendly. MMA is not kid-friendly, especially back then. It was not kid-friendly. There was like hair pulling and eye gouging, and it was brutal. Like, you wouldn't want your kids doing that. And he was like, I want something that has this. So culturally, like you said, the culture became very different. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in its inception from Maeda, had a DNA of MMA, or what they called Vale Tudo, or mixed style fights, or back in the day, what they would call a shoot. A shoot was a pro wrestling match that was real, right? You know, a shoot. Mm-hmm. So it always had that DNA in it, and the Gracies grew up with that. So there was a 3-pronged process of training in original Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. There was the gi stuff that looked a little bit more like Judo. There was self-defense, which is defending a knife and this and that was very important. Always stressed by Ellie Gracie. You have to know how to defend someone trying to stab you or this or that, right? And the third one was Vale Tudo, mixed martial arts, MMA. Now, as I understand it, obviously I came to Brazil a little bit later than that era, but in the 80s and the 90s, at least one time a week, at the very least one time a week, right? People were doing taparia, which was MMA training. Basically, you just don't punch each other hard in the face. But they would take off the gis and they would start and say, you can punch, you can kick, you can do whatever. Okay, let's go. Let's fight. Let's really fight. Because the Gracies for decades were representing their art in mixed martial arts. They said, who's the toughest guy in the block? Let's go. Right? And that changed the art. It changed the art completely. Because, and I can prove it. Because you look at the great judo guys that went into MMA in the very beginning, and they got smoked. And you look at the jiu-jitsu guys, in the very beginning, they dominated.
Right.
Because they just had this knowledge that was not there in judo. It doesn't mean judo is a bad art. It means all those judo guys were trained to do judo. All the jiu-jitsu guys were trained to do grappling as well as mixed martial arts, right?
Yeah.
And it was a big part of their training.
Very different.
And they understood how to do it. They had 40 years to change. So again, it's like, is Spanish comes from Latin, but it is not Latin. It is not. There's significance in it. Italian is not Spanish, even though they have the same root. French is not Italian. They have the same root. Latin, these are all Romance. They have all the same root. Because something has the same root, it doesn't make it the same. And its trajectory determines difference to some extent. Now, if you're speaking Spanish in Madrid and then you're speaking Spanish in Puerto Rico or Mexico, it's still Spanish. Now, it's different. At what point does it become a different language?
Yeah.
There's a point where it might, like Portuguese. Portuguese was originally the same as Spanish. It became a different language. If there's not that much difference, it's not a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at jiu-jitsu, even when they're not doing MMA, they move differently from judo people. They fight in a different rule set from judo people. They train differently from judo people. And like you said, the culture is completely different from judo culture. Sometimes to detriment of the jiu-jitsu world, right? Sometimes the culture is not so cool. But it is different. It's very different.
Right. Very
Informal. Okay, so on all these points, it's different. But what happens is all these judo guys, one of them is a guy named Roddy Ferguson, who I respect, Dr. Roddy Ferguson. He's a very famous judo guy who went to the Olympics, also started doing jiu-jitsu. But for some reason, he can't see the difference. And I think it's, sort of loyalty to the judo world. You're like, I'm a judo man, right? And he's like, no, these are the same arts. Jiu-jitsu is just judo.
Huh.
If you say that, you are ignoring, one, that the jiu-jitsu guys compete in a different rule system. Two, they move completely differently. So even though some of the techniques are the same, in the gi and the overlap is there, they move completely different. Now, when you take the gi off and you compete in no-gi, man, no-gi jiu-jitsu grappling looks nothing like Japanese judo. There's nothing like it.
Right.
It's just totally different, right? MMA grappling looks very nothing like what you do in Japanese judo. And MMA grappling has its roots. I mean, it's evolved since then. But if you're doing jiu-jitsu like they did in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and you're doing the taparia, the MMA fighting, that was not judo. That was different. Yes, you're taking the same techniques, but you're applying them for a completely different circumstance and a completely different tactical orientation. That makes it different. Now, if you were karate in the karate world, they'd be like, yeah, of course it's different. You know how I know this? Going back to Daido Juku, this is where the story comes back. The guy made MMA karate, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what they did? The karate guys sued him, not to do whatever. He said, you can't call that karate anymore because it's too different. They sued him for a lot of money. Like, it was really, really, all the karate guys, it's like, what you're doing is not karate. That's not karate. It's too different. You have to call it something else. So they forced him to make a different style. Now, he originally said, like I said, his original name was Daido Juku Karate. Daido Juku meaning big way karate. So that was the name of his gym. But he wasn't like creating like he wasn't like, I'm going to create my own style. He's like, I'm going to explore the mixing of these arts. But he mixed so much and created something really cool that all the karate guys got pissed and like, you must not call it karate anymore. And he was like so taken aback by this legal challenge that he's like, what do I do? His master, Azuma, right? Who I personally knew quite well. He passed away, unfortunately. Was real lost to the community. Great guy. Real tough fighter. He's like, okay, I give up. Now, karate do. Kara is one character. That means empty right now. Te is hand. And do is way. Karate do. 3 characters. So what he did was, he's like, okay, I'll remove the te. Karate, and then he got rid of the te. So it's karado, but you don't say that in Japanese. You call it kudo. It changes when you put only 2 together. So the pronunciation changed. So it went from karate do, removed the middle character, and made kudo, and said that's our new style. And because he's like, I don't want to fight you in the court and lose a lot of money. Yeah. But he's like, all right, I'm a new style. But he actually forced the Japanese martial arts community, karate community, forced him to change his name because they're like, it's different. So they recognized that there was a significant difference. Yet in the judo community, when Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu trains under different rules, uses huge amount of moves that are illegal in judo, wrist locks, leg locks, all sorts of things that are completely illegal in judo, trains with the gi, without the gi, they say, oh, it's just judo because it comes from judo. That is a ridiculous argument. Yes, Spanish comes from Latin, but it is not Latin, right? And Sambo comes from Judo too. 2 arts that have the same art. So Judo was his parent art. Sambo was the Russian interpretation, and they went and changed it and, again, compete under different rules. And then there's Judo, stayed focused on traditional Judo, and Jiu-Jitsu. They all have the parent art. But because of the influences of Sambo and the influence of Jiu-Jitsu, they became different. Just because something has the same origin does not make it the same as that origin thing. Yes, Irish Americans are not the same as Irish people in Ireland, and that's true. Any Irish people in America maybe don't want to hear that, but it is very true. You know, they're Irish Americans. Sure. It's different, right? And the same thing. Like I was on this Facebook page where this Italian American chef is doing things, right, and he's showing very much an Italian American approach. And the comments on from the Italian side are so, they're like, that's not Italian food. What are you doing? You're ruining the product. This is that. Like you're not Italian. You're Italian American. Like, and the guy's like, he had to say, I'm Italian American. This is different, right? And whatever, I don't know. It was a little, like, the internet gets a little uncalled for, right? But they're like, you're ruining this. This is disgusting. And what do you do? You know, but you could see Italian traditional cuisine approach and Italian American cuisine approach is different. They're very different. Yeah. First of all, the obvious one is Americans got much more access to like big cuts of meat, so it inflected the to some extent. Obviously, had that some places in Italy, but again, the starting point and the ending point are not the same things. And to say that makes the worst mistake in all of martial arts is not appreciating details. Not being aware of the small details that make or break things. And like John Will, who we had on the podcast, he's like, the ability to distinguish small differences from things is what separates a beginner from a master. He's like, you have to develop your ability to see small, minute differences between things to really understand them. I was just talking to one of my students today, and I'll shut up. So I was saying in this position, this what you do here is not the same as you do here. But I said to beginners, when somebody's in the guard, you know the guard, you're in my guard, and then somebody's in the mount, to someone who never trained before, that looks identical. Like even you never trained, but even to you, someone in a guard and someone mounting someone, you're like, no, of course that's like totally different.
Sure.
But you know, my mom kind of looks at, I made her watch martial arts, mixed martial arts so much now that she could probably like, you know, understand the difference now. Maybe, who knows? But when she first started, if I showed her someone in someone's closed guard, in guard, whatever, and then someone mounting, guarantee she couldn't tell the difference. But there's not one grappling martial artist in the world who cannot see the significant difference in that world if they're good. Right? It's completely different.
Right.
Right. And then there's the difference between butterfly guard, De La Riva guard, rack guard, my guard, right? Open guard, right? Damn good guard. All these, they're different. Their rules are different. And there's subtle, significant differences. And then the subtle, significant differences of the way judo people do things and the way jiu-jitsu people has to be appreciated to the extent where right now you have to say it's a different art. And anybody who says Brazilian jiu-jitsu is just judo, it's just Brazilian judo, it's fucking full of shit and stupid. And go see what's going on. By any distinction and measure, they are not the same thing. And if you cannot see that and address it, one, you have some sort of
mental deficiency.
Prejudice. No, you have some sort of prejudice against what the Brazilians did, right? Or some jealousy or something like that.
What's with all this segregation? Can't we just be martial artists?
I actually agree with that, right? At the end of the day, you're right. There are very few new techniques under the sun. So why can't we just come together as martial artists? But the thing is, people do so many different things for so many different reasons. Yeah. I guess it's good as long as we all respect each other and are honest with what we do, that we can stay in our own worlds. Like, Tai Chi is not, knock down karate.
Is there any combat functionality to Tai Chi at all?
That's a big question. So that opens up a whole can of worms. And I would say that when you say combat functionality, you're like, well, in what era? Were you wearing armor and fighting people with swords?
Yeah, yesterday.
Today? Yeah. So it's the same thing with Aikido. It's like it was designed for a different era.
Okay.
But traditionally, like the way people train that we're generally see Tai Chi today is as a health art. So of course nobody's talking about fighting, and nobody understands fighting because it's become a health art. But that being said, there's some elements there that are probably legitimate for the moves that they were designed for. And my assumption is that actually a lot of those are actually weapon moves, because Tai Chi sword, it's a very big part of their thing. A lot of what you do, it just doesn't make sense unless the person's holding a sword. And, like we said in our very first podcast episode, if you had to choose a self-defense thing in a world with no law, you're not going to choose unarmed combat. You're going to choose to combat with a weapon. So that's always takes precedence.
Well, watching those people in the park do Tai Chi with swords would be a whole different experience.
It would be a whole different experience. Yeah, exactly right. And then you don't have to worry about someone taking you down when you have something really, really, really sharp in your hand. Right? You don't have to worry about somebody punching you in the face if your blade is 6 feet long. Or no, not 6 feet, but you know what I'm saying, right? So everything is contextual. Yeah. But a lot of times things don't work because they're archaic. And it's funny you should bring that up. That's one reason I think we still have styles, is because of historical preservation. So a lot of martial art people don't train for functionality. They train for cultural reasons, to be in touch with their culture. I talked about that. So saying that this is Aikido, and this comes from this Japanese tradition and this Japanese culture, and we want to do it this way because we're preserving our culture, that's not a bad thing. Now, is it functional? No. Their goal is not functionality. Their goal is preservation. Now, I'll even say this. There's some very famous martial artists who were much more interested in preservation than functionality. One of them, I would say, and I get a lot of flack for this, is Dan Inosanto, the major student of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was not about preservation. He was about functionality. But Dan Inosanto is a martial arts nerd to the 10,000th degree. It's so amazing. Like, he loves all martial arts, but he also saw that some martial arts were dying. So what he did is he started learning them. He said, these are cultural heritage. These are cultural, treasures. So like, if the world lost it, this would be a tremendous loss. So he's like, did them and then brought them into his training. Like, Filipino hubud, or panantukan, or some of these things that are dying out, and the different styles of stick fighting, and then he does silat and this and that and all these other things. These styles that kind of like would have died out if he hadn't popularized them. That's laudable. Except what we talked about in the JKD world, then there's like everybody's doing 40,000 different martial arts and they're not good at anything.
Can they just videotape it and put it in like a library?
Yeah, I guess that's it's funny going back to Maya Soder. Maya, part of what she did was to preserve her teacher's teachings. She went into this like video capture thing, and definitely did the whole curriculum of her teacher Sunny and Pad's teaching, so that it would be preserved. So I actually believe that, and I think today, right now that we have YouTube, that the chance that things would be lost is not. But remember, this was like 1970, 1980. It was a very different world back then. They didn't even have VHS in 1970. Right? No, that was in the 80s. They didn't in the 70s. You didn't even have that.
Disc?
No, that was the late 80s,
what did
early
you
90s.
watch?
You watched live TV.
Holy
that's all.
cow.
You had those spiral
35 millimeters.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only thing you had.
Yo.
Can I tell you? I was a funny story. My dad was born in 1913, right? So he's older. So when I was a kid, he was and we had all this stuff in our house that was like so archaic because like he would have like videotape, like he would take he'd go on travel and take video, but he'd have the Super 8. Yes, exactly. You'd have like Super 8, and you'd have these slides that he would take pictures and he put them on slides, and this kind of like slideshow, and we had like stacks. So when he passed away, it was like getting rid of the stuff. There's so much of it. It was crazy, but all this like archaic technology but it was sad because of course you lost a lot. I remember like how do you access this information here because the technology is gone, so anyway, that's kind of funny, but yeah, it's like it was a different world back then. So preservation it's a respectable goal. Nothing I'm interested in. There's enough preservation going on right now. I'm only interested in functionality. That's the only thing I'm interested in. So now people ask me, they said the same thing to me, because I'm doing something very different from what I learned. They said, René, are you doing a different style of jiu-jitsu? And I stopped and I'm like, huh. And I said, no. But at the same time, I am doing things very, very different from what I learned. So, but at the same way, I am influenced a lot by the Gracie heritage, but we're much more about combining things for high percentage fighting in mixed martial art, and not ever training in the gi or something like that, and removing a lot of what are known as fundamentals because we see them as flawed. So we are doing something eclectic and unique. And so it really helped me to say, I'm doing MMA. So I had to distance myself from jiu-jitsu because it caused political problems, not just in the ranking, but also what people expect when they walk in our gym, right? They're like expecting to put on a gi, they're expecting Brazilian culture, which is very loose and laid back, and that's not me. I as I said, sometimes I find that culture very freeing, but it's also can lead to a lot of bad behavior, a lot. So the culture is a little bit stricter. What we do is different. The way we do things are very different, and so at some level, we can't really call ourselves Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu anymore because I guess we're not doing that. But that being said, I'm not ready to create like René Dreyfus Jiu-Jitsu. I'm not ready to do that. I'm not. I don't know. It seems a little arrogant. I don't like that. But I do like that we're forging our own path of creativity. And I resonate with what Bruce Lee said. It's like it's just about functionality and expressing your body and seeing what's the most efficient move at that time. And to me, that's still jiu-jitsu. Because at the end of the day, what we should be doing is efficient. Now, those efficiencies change when you change the rules, right? If you're saying, oh, we're only in judo, and these are the rules that we're allowed to do, and we're only allowed to wear this clothing, what's efficient is that. Then you say, oh, in no-gi or in MMA, what's efficient? This is that. So, but I do still think, because if you go back to the old definition of jiu-jitsu, grappling styles that have a lineage, a link to the ancient Japanese tradition. That doesn't mean they're copies of them. They have a link to them, an antecedent of that art. I'm still doing jiu-jitsu.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking of René Dreyfus Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. Oh, but can I interrupt? But there's
Please.
other thing is there's also a lot of guys in America. They say we don't do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu anymore. We do American Jiu-Jitsu. Jake Shields is one of them.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, we don't train the same way. So they said it. I'm just not ready to do that. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So René Dreyfus Jiu-Jitsu at Radical MMA. That's what you teach. Just kidding.
No, no,
Just kidding. But like, if one of your students went to Japan and was in a gym, and there was somebody that like, could they tell? I mean, that they trained with you?
That actually happened. That one of my students went to a person I know to train in California, and he's like, "Yeah, I just see René's fingerprints all over your game." You know, it's like it's just different.
That's
right?
so cool.
He's like you do this, you don't do that. You do this, you don't do that.
Yeah.
But the same thing is like I have the fingerprints over all my teachers. Now, of course, I don't only do that, but your teachers make the students. That's true in all martial arts, you know? I'm not unique. But that being said, like you said, Shu-Ha-Ri, you have to you have that foundation, but then you do have to go strong. But
like you see that in like martial arts movies where like people are like fighting someone like, oh, you trained with Master, what's his name? So that really is. So
it's interesting. This guy came in. This was just last week, like a week and a half ago, too, something like that, right? This guy came in. He's a fighter. He's an Irish guy. Really nice guy.
Irish American or Irish?
No, Irish,
Okay.
right? But he lives in California. He fights out of California, and he's like a cage combat champion or something, right? Really good guy. Really nice guy. I forgot his name. I'm sorry. But he came in on a Saturday to do some sparring, and he sparred all our guys. And he said, he's like, all your guys have like really similar games. Like just and Sandra was like, yeah, it's the system. It's the system we do. We all do the system. Now, at some level, the system can't be carbon copy. The system is the foundation, but within my students, I have students who are really good at triangle chokes, really good at arm bars. Like Sandro's really good armbar guy, not the best at leg triangle. Devin is a great head and arm guy, not the best at triangle chokes, right? Yeah, it goes back and forth. One of my students, Malcolm, fantastic leg triangle guy, right? You know, they're all different, but they're within the system. Mm-hmm. When we hit this spot, we know this is the rules, the general rules that guide us to fight in a way that are high percentage for MMA,
right,
and high percentage for my philosophy. And the guy goes, yeah, he's like, everybody kind of like has a very similar game. And then he said, yeah, at my gym, everybody's so totally different. And there are gyms like that where the teachers actually don't teach that much. They let this is a very Brazilian thing. They let the students explore in a very laissez-faire way and like let you be you, which at some level can be good. But like anything, too much is bad. Mm-hmm. So what you do is those people who excel in those gyms are the ones that also, to begin with, they generally are very good athletes. So they kind of can work their way through things. But the other thing is, this is what happens. You develop your game, but your game becomes very narrow. So you're this guy here, and you don't have a broad set of skills because you found what works for you, and that's what you do. You found what works for you, and that's what you do. That's what you do 100% of the time, all the time. Bump. I'm this guy. I bring the fight here, I win here.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have a broad set of skills, right? You have a narrow set of very, 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 very tough skills. But when you have a good teacher, you have that narrow set of something you're really good at, but you also have the broad understanding of other positions. Like I said, some of my guys are not the best at, say, leg triangle, but it's not like they can't do it. They can do it. They can go there and they can win. But even though that's not their A game, but it's their B or C game, but they're still very competent.
Right.
You know, like I said, Devin has the great head and arm game, and Sandro's good at it, but not as good as Devin. But that doesn't mean he's bad at it. He's actually very good at it, even though that's not his A game,
mm-hmm.
right? Because I've made everybody be well-rounded in every single angle of combat. I'm like, here, you have to know this here. You have to know it. Now, okay, that's not your absolute kill game, but you have to be competent.
Right.
And good teachers do that, I think. depending on what the goal is. So John Will again said to me that when he was training with Higan Machado, Higan said to him, he's like, do you want to be a competitor or do you want to be a teacher? And he said, I want to be a teacher. He's like, okay, now you got to learn the whole art.
Huh.
And he's like, but if I said competitor, it'd be different. He's like, you don't need to know the whole art, but you do need to know, like, you need to like force your game on people and you can win that way. And that's true. And judo used to be like that. Jiu-jitsu used to be like that, where you could force a small subset of knowledge onto people and you could win. It was who got to their game first, but that's actually changed. I don't think you can win at the high level of judo or jiu-jitsu unless you have a kind of broader game than that was before, because people just have too much knowledge now. Yeah. They won't let you bring it into the game. And so that's kind of how I think. My students definitely look like my students. They definitely do. And when I train with teachers who I really respect, like, and they're very good and they're very on top of teaching, you can see the fingerprints of where they are. You can see Machado guys. John Jock's Machado students are John Jock's. Like, yeah, you could see it. You could see Higan Machado guys are kind of like that. You know, you can see Hickson guys. Yeah, you get it. You see the difference. You see how they're the fingerprints of the teacher. It's on
like
the
you're
student.
building immortality, because like you're kind of kids.
Yeah, there are kids. Yeah, and then you're putting you're giving a contribution to the art. Yeah, that hopefully will stay with you. Yeah. And that's actually like the main reason I teach, because I want to make a contribution to the art, and through my students and through my own, research. That's very important to me, actually.
That's very cool.
That's the reason why I'm very into competition, because I want to refine the knowledge so I can contribute more. I don't really care about winning, and that's not true. I like winning. Everybody likes winning. But when we lose,
you learn more from losses than wins.
You do. You learn more. More. I mean, there's one loss. The one loss I have, like there's some nights I wake up, I'm like, fuck, like it's already 20 years ago. And I'm like, wake up. My wife's like, calm down. You're 55. He's like, I gotta go back in the cage. It's sometimes it just, I am a competitive guy, but you definitely learn more for your losses. And that loss that I have really taught me a lot of important things. Yeah. So at some level, I'm thankful for it. That's bullshit. That's what I'm supposed to say. That's total bullshit. I'm not thankful. I wish I hadn't lost.
Well, you won in here.
Yeah.
Is there any? Do you ever think about fighting again, or at least competing in at least grappling competitions?
No, I have no interest in grappling competitions. Talking about Kudo, so the MMA karate, they have a old guys division.
You're not old enough for that.
Oh, I'm totally old enough for that. I'm 55. I'm so old. I'm old as dirt. But if my body heals up enough, I had my knee replacement surgery. I have some other things going on. If I can get to the point where I can start training very seriously, that was something I'd like to do, because it's an old man's division, like you're fighting with your peers. Yeah. But let me tell you, Barrett Yoshida, who's, we never had him on the podcast, but he's someone I so respect. This guy is 50. He's 50. He been competing since before I started jiu-jitsu, I think. He's unbelievable. We talked about the Abu Dhabis. He medaled in almost every Abu Dhabi, in the Abu Dhabi Hall of Fame. He's still competing in sport jiu-jitsu and no gi, everything. And he competes in this WNO, who's number one organization, where it's like he has the title there. He just fought again a guy who was like 30 years younger. And he smoked him. It was unbelievable. This is the great thing about jiu-jitsu, is that if you're tactical enough, and let me tell you, one of the great moments of life was learning, training with Barry Yoshida. Like, that guy he's so cool. I have some stories. I was so glad to have trained with him. I'm hoping to go to California again and just drop in his academy. I didn't train with him very long, just a couple weeks, but it was very meaningful for me. Unbelievable practitioner. And just a great guy. Great guy. Very interesting teaching method. I never saw it before. It's so crazy. So when he wants to teach technique, he doesn't talk at all. He goes, points his finger up here, and he puts his hand there. Hand here, hand there. He will not talk at all. He just mimes the moves, and he'll do it over and over again, but he won't actually talk. And then people have to find it. But the two things is, like, if you're not paying attention, you so it zones people in, but also sometimes the words get in the way of the knowledge. It's brilliant, but you have to really be focused to see what he's doing. Like, you really have to focus. But so it makes the students drive in and stare at him, and he will not say anything. But he'll come over and correct you with his hand. But his teaching is not very verbal. It's really interesting. And his students were amazing. Actually, I got to mention this, very sad. One of the students, Damian, I trained with him every single day I got there. This guy had the most beautiful jiu-jitsu, and a nice guy who's a computer engineer, computer programmer, huge in his field. He had everything a martial artist had. He was amazing at technique. He was also really, really successful in his life, and is happy. And the most important, he's like one of the nicest guys I ever met on the mat. And he, like, in 10 minutes, we were like best buddies, like just training. And I managed to catch him in a tap. And a lot of times, visiting fighter, they catch you in a tap. It could be like, okay, now I'm going to kill you. And he didn't. He was like, oh, wow, that was cool. Can you show me how to do that? I'm like, oh, it's this. And oh, cool. And then he caught me, and we went back and forth. And it was just wonderful. And he unfortunately was just in that plane crash in San Diego last week, or 2 weeks ago, and he passed away. I'm still like broken up about it. The guy was like, and I'm sure Barrett is broken up. He's a student, right? It's very sad when you lose people like that. They're just that guy made a contribution to the art. Not only became a world champion in jiu-jitsu, but he made a contribution to art because he was one of the most helpful guys in that I've ever seen, in terms of being on the mat and helping you treat. It's a great guy. And I was like looking forward to going back and training with him, but no, he's unfortunately passed.
Well,
you heard about that crash? Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah, he was on the plane.
You'll train with him in the afterlife.
Yeah, I know. Oh, hopefully, I actually don't believe
there is one. I don't know. Well, he might be surprised.
So anyway, that is my rant on styles.
Very interesting. There's too much.
Too much?
Too much styles. Ryan styles.
Well, this is the thing. Bruce Lee did say it. Do not get caught in the classical trap of martial arts styles. Yeah. Be
like water.
Be like water, which means water flows into whatever container and becomes that. Meaning, if you're striking, you're a striker. If you're grappling, you're a grappler. If you're on the ground, you're on the ground. If you're defending a knife or have a weapon, you're that. Like, so that's water. That's the idea. This is why I think jiu-jitsu, in my interpretation, the ancient arts of the samurai, lineage that goes back to the ancient arts of samurai, all those were basically mixed martial arts because they involve grappling and striking and this and that. They didn't involve just grappling. So I think of MMA as a form of jiu-jitsu. I'm the only one who thinks that way. But so to me, it's more like jiu-jitsu's martial art expression with the goal of being efficient and using the source material of what the Japanese samurai invented as a starting point, right? But the goal of efficiency being the number one key.
Yeah.
That's for me what it is, And then, but what I do, it involves so much more striking now. Most people would say what I do is not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu anymore. That being said, I'm very, very, very grateful to all the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teachers who taught me too.
It's René Dreyfus Jiu-Jitsu.
No, it's not. Don't say that.
My neighbor, when I was growing up, used to take Taekwondo classes, and he'd always beat me up. And then I got bigger than him, and so I beat him up. And I said, I don't know Taekwondo. I know kick your ass Kwando.
And when you train badly, it's Taekwondo.
Good one.
Thank you.
But I'll add a rim shot in editing. Well, we did it another week. Great information.
So yeah, the UFC's this weekend. It's Poirier versus the Hawaiian dude. Shoot, I forgot his name.
The Rock.
No,
Jason Momoa.
No, not that Hawaiian dude. Max Holloway.
Max Holloway.
So that's gonna be a barn burner, and there's some fights we could talk about it next week after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barn burning.
Looking forward.
Barn raising.
Barn burning.
We're gonna raise it, then we're gonna burn it.
Burn it.
The Amish people come in, and then Hawaiians come in and burn it. All right.
All right. On that note, we'll go.
We're starting off the fight is
Burn some bars.
done. Lessons learned and battles won. The journey's long, but